I just want to introduce Bill Hahn. He's our Assistant Superintendent at Walpole Public Schools, and Mike Frischer. He is our School Business Administrator. So, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm Bridget Goff, Superintendent of Schools. I've been around in Walpole for a long time. I believe this is my 30th year in the Walpole Public Schools, and I'm also a client. I'm a graduate of Walpole Public Schools as well. So it's really nice to be here. Thank you. So we just want to provide an overview out of where we've been, where we're going, and also answer some questions at the end of our presentation. So taking a look, I think it's important to show who are members of our Walpole Middle School project team. It really encompasses various stakeholders throughout the town. You have Walpole Public Schools representatives from, you met Mark Breen tonight. He is a member of our school committee and also our school building committee chair. We have school committee members on here, Nancy Gallivan and Jen Gayosis. You also see some school building members as well. We also have Town of Walpole representatives from people on finance committees, such as Sue Lawson. She's also the vice chair of the school building committee. We also have a member of the select board, our town administrators, our building superintendents, and then you can also see members such as Jack Conroy, Jack Fisher, and Jeff Fisher. We also have community representatives on our school project team, as well as Compass, TAPE, that's the name of the architect team, and then David Stevens from New Vista Design. He was really instrumental in helping to meet with stakeholders, school and community stakeholders, to developing and run these really nice visioning sessions for us. So taking a brief look of how we arrived here, back in 2013, Walpole Public Schools contracted with the McGuire Group to provide really a comprehensive master planning study to address the facility needs of the school. And the report also found Johnson Middle School as having major deficiencies as well. And then in 2016, a secondary school space study option study was conducted by DRA Associates. And Walpole applied to the MSBA, the School Building Association, Massachusetts Building School Association, and with their first SOI. And you can see that in 2018, MSBA invited Walpole into what was known as the eligibility period. And it was then that the town appropriated $1.5 million for a feasibility study. And the MSBA, what was great about the eligibility period is they not only recognize Byrd as having needs and would look at the enrollment at Byrd Middle School, but they also approved a study for both enrollments, so combining Byrd and Johnson and looking at those enrollments together. In 2019, Walpole was invited into the feasibility process, and the feasibility studies carefully examined potential solutions to the issues identified at school facilities and helped us develop the most cost-effective plan to address these issues. Moving into 2020 and 2021, you can see that this is the feasibility and schematic design process. In 2020, we secured Compass as our project management team, TAPE as the designer selection, and then also we had to submit the preliminary design program report. In 2020 and 2021, the schematic design process began, and then the report was submitted in July. And on August 25th, the board at MSBA approved our report. You can see here we've had multiple community forums. Today we're here at the Council on Aging, and then we have 2 more meetings, one next week and one next month. One's going to be held at, and you'll see those dates, one will be held at Johnson, another one will be held at Byrd, and we'll be giving any optional tours before those meetings as well, if people are interested. As you know, Compass has worked with numerous projects with us, and they're well known for finishing on time and under budget. So no pressure, Brian. You can take a look here at the feasibility and design phase. What this is just showing you is that it's a very comprehensive process of all the phases and the deliverables that we were required to do through the school building committee. Everything from a 65-page educational program to a space study to site developments, in the preferred schematic report, looking at enrollment, options, preferred solutions, and finishing with the schematic design is where we are now with all this design program from traffic conditions to geotechnical, all our environmental decisions, sustainability, ADA, so all of that. So it's
So
just,
you're marching along, excuse me, you're marching along like you've got full approval and full funding. I haven't heard anything about anything like that.
we're going to get there. You'll see. This is where we are in the process. We're currently at the schematic design report right now, and we'll take.
Do you think you're going anywhere with this?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Thank you.
This work was approved under the original $1.5 million appropriation, so that's what town meeting approved, and then the MSBA requires you to get all the way through this step before they make a decision on the project. So the project is funded up through this phase only, and that's what's coming to town meeting.
Okay. So looking at the educational plan information, what the MSBA required us to do through this process was to really establish a comprehensive and thoughtful education program that articulates the educational goals and needs of the district. And it also provides for this future flexibility in order to adapt to changes, programming, or teaching methodologies over the useful life of the school. And really, Walpole Middle Schools, we're committed to educating students in an inclusive environment where students have equitable access to resources and really engaging opportunities to learn and thrive. Teaming, you'll find out, we'll be talking about that in a minute, is really at the heart of the middle school philosophy. The design of a combined middle school must promote an environment where students, staff, families, and community members come together and build collaborative partnerships. And you'll see some of these components when you take a look at some of the the renderings. In terms of the enrollment decision, in December of 2020, the school committee voted unanimously to pursue a combined middle school enrollment. And the rationale for that is listed here, and I'll just go through that. We're looking at equitable access. In this enrollment decision, all students receive resources and educational opportunities to learn and thrive. All students would benefit from the combined middle school, the resources, the general education, special education programming. So really improved access to resources. We're really committed to providing educational experiences for all children and children with disabilities in what we call the least restrictive environment. So having students in the middle schools and in-district programs in one building maximizes the services and enables greater flexibility. It also builds a stronger learning environment as students have one neighborhood, one school. Teaming, in order for students to truly feel a sense of belonging and connection and gaining that social, emotional learning and academic benefits of being in a small learning community, we believe that they must be grouped in clearly defined teaming and consistent teaming, in which a combined middle school will enable us to create. It also allows for improved school programmatic and related arts offerings. So a combined middle school allows the staff to offer a more robust related arts program and curriculum and after-school programs that we cannot currently do. And finally, a combined middle school is significantly more cost-effective than building separate projects. If separate, it could be more than 8 years to complete a second project with the MSBA building. So just looking at a few renderings before I turn it over to Brian. The school would be 162,193 square feet with 45 classrooms. So you're looking at 5 classrooms per team, which you'll see a little more delineated in a minute, with 3 teams per grade. Neighborhoods, again, you'll hear that sense of community. You'll see that this is a little bit more of an aerial view. It's separated car, bus, circulation loops, overflow, event parking, and a new entrance to East Street. Again, grade level neighborhoods was mentioned 78 times in the educational plan, and teaming was mentioned almost 140 times. Neighborhoods really equate to the building geography, and they drive our core academic spaces. You can see here they're organized. The school would be organized by 3 grade level teams, 3 teams per grade, and support the school's team-based approach to curriculum delivery. So it contains a variety of flexible spaces. The special education programs, our academic support programs, that'll all be an inherent part of each neighborhood. The neighborhoods would also contain 4 general education classrooms and a dedicated science classroom, and what we call a STEAM space, a science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, to really facilitate what we call inquiry, presentation, and project-based learning, to really get authentic real-world experiences. And then also collaboration. So you have those 5 classrooms per team. When you're looking at neighborhoods within the building should have a feeling of home and that they're comfortable, they're safe, and really sending a message to students that they are part of a small learning community, which in turn is connected to the fabric of the larger school. The building would maximize and enable greater flexibility in regard to the delivery of all student services and builds a stronger learning environment. You have what I said before, equitable access to 21st century learning and programming. All students would benefit from the resources. You would have technology literacy and computer science lab, multimedia and video production labs. These labs bring interactive and immersive experiences through virtual reality platforms. Students learn skills and they apply them as part of a team to address unique design challenges and create authentic solutions. You look at labs where students can study solar energy, hydroponics. You can look at energy conservation and looking at our next generation of environmentalists or biological sciences. Also enables us to build our middle school robotics program and our news production team, which is a great feeder into Walpole High School. In terms of outdoor learning can be used beyond the recreational use and provides project space, social space, classrooms, and support areas for our educational environment. It enables students to really become engaged in these meaningful and exciting projects within our community. And it's an important factor to have that indoor-outdoor connection and also hold performances for family in the community. A dedicated auditorium. We have an incredibly large music program. Every student in our middle school takes the music. One of the courses, in fact, would be held on stage, and then there's actually another classroom behind the auditorium to help our music program. We have a robust drama program at each middle school, and it would enable community-based performing arts groups, and then also our community meetings and events. The cafeteria and the kitchen, the dining space, as well as our kitchen, really facilitates community outreach, accommodating off-hour school and community education and partnerships. Finally, the central kitchen and cafeteria is also utilized to provide vocational opportunities for our special education programming. The space would support job training and hands-on learning for our special education students. This partnership is an integral part of our inclusion program. And finally, the gym, we would be taking obviously the 2 middle school gyms and combining them to create one larger gym. And there's one teaching station that will be shared with our special education students. We call that adaptive phys ed. It allows our occupational therapy and our physical therapy. They can have dedicated space and meet their specific needs and allow for them to really have that essential integration with their peers. The visioning sessions throughout the community and our schools expressed a strong desire to build a school that allows for community access. And we feel like this school does a fantastic job of it because it provides performance venues, gathering spaces, athletic spaces that can be safely accessed. It's actually in a separate wing. So it can be accessed by the community after school, on weekends and during the summer months in the auditorium, in the CAF, and in the gym. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian to do the fun stuff.
All right, everyone hear me? Hi, I'm Brian Jarvis, Director for Compass Project Management. We are the owner's project manager. Part of the process with public construction, also with the state, is for towns to bring on an owner's project management group if they don't have in-house facilities themselves. I was also project manager in town here for the fire station, police station, and this building. So it's good to see everyone here. This building looks great. I did a walk yesterday, beautiful day. Love the outside. I think it came out really nice. I'm also a resident. Both of my boys graduated from Byrd Middle School. My wife graduated from Walpole High. So I'm also an in-town resource as well. So I'll talk a little bit through the numbers, some of the project management aspects of this project, and then we can open it up to questions. I'll try to answer as many questions with these slides, but if you got something I'm not getting to, feel free to raise your hand and we can take some questions. Kind of rounding out the design of the building from a sustainability and energy efficiency perspective, there are a lot of mandates currently in place with the state that will be taking effect over the next several years. And a lot of school districts are building their buildings more and more energy efficient in reaction to that, and also just proactively trying to keep the cost of operating buildings down and the payback of those buildings coming back to the districts. This building will be targeting a LEED Silver level, which is leadership in energy and environmental design. It's been yet to be decided if we're actually going to seek certification, but it'll be designed to that level. There's a lot of things that go into LEED. It's just not energy efficiency. There's things like sustainable building products, access to public transportation, access for biking, where materials come from, et cetera, that go into that calculation. The energy efficient systems within the building right now are planned to be 20% more efficient than the Mass Energy Code. In doing so, that qualifies the building for an additional 2% reimbursement from the state, the Mass School Building Authority. We've also partnered with Eversource and their Mass Save partners to explore some rebates and incentives. So there will be several opportunities for one-time incentives, both pre-construction and post-construction, with those utility companies, in addition to whatever, obviously, operational efficiencies that are earned through the lifetime of the building. The building will be considered net zero energy ready. Again, there's targets coming from the mandates coming from the state to meet net zero ready buildings. I think everything by 2050, and they're making more mandates basically every day. What that means is that this building will be set up at some point with the introduction of a renewable energy source to basically offset its energy use during the course of the year. It doesn't mean that it goes off the grid. It just means that by the course of the year, by the time they pay energy bills and produce energy on site, that they will net zero out. So this building is moving towards an infrastructure that will allow for the use of solar panels. So the building will be constructed to support solar arrays on the roof, have infrastructure within the building to get it to the electric room, have infrastructure out to possible parking canopy locations. And then when the town decides when and how to do solar panels that meets both the district's and the town's needs, we can add them to either add them to the project or add them after the project. The building will be ready. Part of the things that we focused on was also looking at things that are not easily updatable as you move through the next several years, trying to meet some of these mandates. So highly insulating the building, looking at very efficient electric HVAC system, LED lighting, low flow fixtures, everything that we can do to maximize efficiency of the building that are also cost effective currently. And what we found over the last few years is a lot of these technologies have really come down in price, and they continue to come down now that they're becoming more mainstream. So right now, solar and photovoltaics is how this building is being set up. So project budget. Estimated total project budget, so that's everything including project management, the architect's fees, furniture, construction, and contingencies are a big part of this as well, is $115.7 million. That was the cost that was submitted to the MSBA at the beginning of July, and that's what they reviewed and approved for this project. And that's based on the schematic design estimate, as I mentioned, approved by the MSBA board in August. That cost includes the auditorium, central kitchen, the third gym space, and CM at risk delivery method, which is not a design build delivery method. We can answer some questions about that later, but that's included in the cost. MSBA stated reimbursement. So there's a couple, when you work with the MSBA and they bring you into your program, they give you an initial reimbursement rate or a base rate. So when they sign Walpole up as part of that feasibility schematic, they do a bunch of calculations based on the demographic of the town, the wealth of the town, et cetera, and come up with a reimbursement rate. The base reimbursement rate for Walpole was 48.68%. And what that means is that the MSBA will look at every cost on the project out of that $115 million. They will deem some of those costs to be eligible for reimbursement. Some are not eligible, and we'll get into that for a couple of reasons. But that happens on every project. Not every cost on every project is eligible. It's just it's not a Walpole thing. It's the way that they do their business. But 48% of all eligible costs will be reimbursed. You then have additional incentive points that you can gain throughout the project for a variety of reasons. Walpole's actually going to pick up another 4%, 2 of them from the energy efficiency, and 1.3 for Walpole's maintenance program. So the MSBA looks at how well the school district takes care of their buildings and their maintenance program for going forward, basically protecting their investment, and they give additional points for that. So Walpole's stated reimbursement rate will be 52.2%. However, based on not all project costs being eligible, at the end of the day, what do you really get back from the state? And that's always lower than the stated, rate. That's just the way it happens on the project. We're projecting roughly 32%, and that's based on the MSBA's review of that total project budget that we sent in August. And we'll see more detail about that in a few more slides. So that means at the end of the day, you're going to get roughly 32% of that $152 million. The town will have to fund the rest, or the town share is approximately $77 million. The way the MSBA works, though, is you must go to town meeting and get the entire project amount approved, funded, and then you submit reimbursements as you move through the project. So we're doing that right now with that original 1.5 that was approved, all the way through feasibility and schematic. We've been submitting monthly invoices and everything that the town has paid into the MSBA, and they've been paying back 48% of that 1.5 that we've been submitting. And at the end of the job, they hold the final 5% of the project, do one big final audit, and make a final payment back to the town to close it out. Their process has been improved greatly in the last few years. Several years ago, 10, 15 years ago, you'd work with the MSBA. Sometimes that closeout would go on for years. Reimbursements would take forever. Right now, they close them out about a year after occupying the building. At Compass, we've done over 30-something school projects. We probably processed over $250-something million in reimbursements. The towns, we do it quite a lot. We've been working with them since day one, 10, 15 years ago. So this one's a little bit tough to see, but I'll point out what you're looking at. So this is a graph from the MSBA. They update this quarterly. And if you go to their website and look at their working with them, building with us link, they can actually go into every project that they have. And you can look at how Walpole stacks up to every single project that's out there. And they chart this, and they have different, with the key on the right there. So the orange squares that are filled in are actually projects that have been built and bid. Starting at the far left, down at the bottom, that very first dot was Norwood High School 10 years ago, or almost 12 years ago, which was our project. And what you can see there is that's what the cost of construction was back in 2009. And you can see the line where the cost of construction is today. Along the way there, the other dots are some of the estimates that occur in the early feasibility phase that we're in. The orange squares that aren't filled in are actually a bid number. And as I mentioned, the solid squares are projects that were actually built, and they do what's called a project funding adjustment based on the bid. So if the project is approved, the town will enter into a project funding agreement with the MSBA. That's the next step. Once the bids or the final construction numbers are known, we'll actually adjust that based on where that ends up. So currently, Walpole, if you take the orange line, which is the average cost of school buildings over the years, and project that kind of on the current chart the course that it's on, and you can see the blue dots up above it and below it, kind of right in the middle is where that dashed line is. Walpole Middle School is slightly below that average construction cost of school projects in the MSBA pipelines. There's four to eight schools above it, and there's a cluster of schools right around it. I will point out that the clusters of schools right around it are elementary schools. One of them's in Medfield, one of them is in Westwood. So it's a little bit of a difference. Middle schools are typically more expensive. They have more spaces, more unique spaces, more types of equipment than elementary schools. So from a cost perspective, Walpole is slightly below the average from the MSBA's cost perspective, which I think is a good thing. The other thing to note is the red arrow. So again, getting back to what is eligible and what is ineligible, one of the big things that's ineligible from the MSBA's perspective is they cap their reimbursement on construction cost at $1 per square foot. It used to be $333, and it was that amount for almost 4 years, 5 years, and they just upped it to $360, which is a benefit to Walpole. But that's the green line down at the bottom. So the orange line and the red arrow down to the green line. Basically what the MSBA says is if your project costs $500 a square foot to build, and the average cost is somewhere in the $600 range, we're only going to give you $360 towards it. Everything else is ineligible. So that difference, they take it right off the top, and they take the 115, and now they're going to say, we're going to reimburse you out of 90 million or whatever that math is. So it has nothing to do with what Walpole's chosen, what Walpole's done. It has just simply the cost of construction. Now, obviously, you're trying to keep the cost down as low as you can, but again, with an average building cost of $600 plus, that's difficult to do in today's market. So it's not unique to Walpole, but that's what happens on every project. Yes?
I have a question. Lately, because of the COVID, building materials have skyrocketed.
That's right.
Okay? And time, labor to work on anything. So, projected costs were made how many years ago?
This summer, and they include the current market for COVID plus an escalation factor of potentially what the market could look like when we actually bid this a year from now, or when we actually finalize projects. So we did take into consideration the current market plus escalation on top of that. So you're absolutely right. You have to account for that. I believe there's current market prices that are in there, and we have roughly 7 or 8% in escalation between now and this time next year. Based on what we've been seeing in the market, that's what the professionals are saying. Typically, we see escalation somewhere in the 3 to 5% range on a typical year, so it's almost double that. And that's on top of what they're seeing now for current market prices. So again, markets, depending on the material, some markets are still inflated kind of due to COVID. Some have started to come back down, but there's still discrepancies based on distribution and everything else, and they fluctuate almost daily for some materials at this point. Includes an escalation factor in it until we actually get to this time next year when, if the project is approved, we'd be putting together a final construction cost, yes. So there's a chance that, obviously, if costs come in better, there's a chance to be below that. But right now, that's what we're projecting. Mark?
I would add, it seems, and again, I'm not an expert, but from what I've learned, it seems as if they want you to be pleasantly surprised when the project comes in, as opposed to unpleasantly surprised. So these estimates really err on the side of costs going up.
And what's pleasant about this whole thing is $77 million.
Right.
Where the hell it's coming from, because you just blew 18 ball fields that are hardly used.
Right. So we'll get into some of that. We got more slides for that. That's fine. So this is how the current project compares to everything that's in the project pipeline, and I'll help point it out. So everything that is in the same basic approval period of Walpole is right in this area here. So these are all schools that have estimates in. They're a little bit behind us. The ones with squares are at the same location as us, and the ones with orange squares have actually received bids back. So these are ones that received bids back late 2020 or early 2021. So you can kind of see where costs of constructions were for some of these projects that have received bids. So that line right in the middle is where the average is, and Walpole, the goal has been trying to be as cost effective as possible. What does that mean to the taxpayer? We've already alluded to this. So again, $115 million project. The MSBA at the end of the day is really going to reimburse about 32% of that, which leaves about $78 million left to fund. That's being funded through the override. The projection for that funding and tax impact, again, based on assessed values, the highlighted is the average single-family assessed home in Walpole. Is $438, and that is based on a calculation of that $78 million at a 30-year term level debt, assuming 3.5%, which we also think is conservative. Borrowing rates are a little bit lower than that today, but we're carrying 3.5%. And we can answer questions about that. Obviously, if your home value is higher than lower than that, it's adjusted. But that's where this project is ending up, again, based on that 115 total project budget, and then funding the difference from the MSBA at $78 million for 30 years at 3.5%. So that doesn't take into anything else from a financing perspective. That is just this project in a vacuum. It doesn't take into account any expiring debt. It doesn't take into account if they actually borrow at 1.5% or 2%. That's what we think is a conservative estimate of what that tax impact would look like. Yes. This is just for the residential. There's also a calculation graph like this for commercial as well. I don't have that with us tonight, though. Yeah, I think this is strictly what would be applied to the residents, so they'd be offset by whatever they've already taken in by commercial. I think, is that what your question is? Yeah, I don't have a slide on the commercial tax. You're asking if. Right. Yeah, I don't have that slide, but I can. My understanding is that this is based on after that's factored in, but I have to confirm that. That's a good question. Comparison to some other communities and the two neighbors closest to us, Westwood and Medfield, they're both currently doing elementary schools. Medfield actually has a community forum tonight. They're doing a project, Westwood is doing a project, enrollment of 560. They're actually combining two elementary schools. Total cost of that project is $86 million. Their town share is estimated to be about $68 million. Westwood, again, due to the calculations, the way the MSBA comes up with their reimbursement rates, their starting point is 39%. We're projecting that their actual rate of reimbursement with the MSBA is going to be about 21%. So their tax impact right now to the average assessed value, they're carrying 30 years. This number is based on 30 years at 4%, 591. They've just changed that this week to a lower borrowing percentage based on what they think they'll be able to borrow at, which brings them down closer to Walpole, but they're still slightly higher. Medfield, Dale Elementary School, enrollment 575, total cost 82 million, town share 63. Similar to Medfield, or excuse me, similar to Westwood, 39% starting, but they're only going to see about 23% back. Walpole's at 55 and 32. And their tax impact's roughly $900, 30 years at 3.5%. Again, conservative, but they have less commercial than both of these towns. Yep.
Has anybody looked at the projected enrollment from kindergarten all the way through high school for the next couple of years?
Yep.
Because the enrollment is going down, it's not going up.
You got it? Yep.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if this is on. Is this on? Okay. Thanks. Yeah, so as part of the deliverables, we're required to submit to the MSBA enrollment projections applications. And to that included, and I'm just reading up to what we had to include, what data by the district, as well as the data that we had to provide by the Department of Elementary Secondary Education, the Massachusetts Department of Health, the school department, and the town administration. So it really was a comprehensive report and included the past 10 years of enrollment, K to 12. It included any building permits that passed and projected, residential developments, housing sales, collaboratives, out-of-district students, private schools, births, and baseline projections. And that came up to, they gave us an enrollment of 905 for a combined middle school, 905 student enrollment.
They project that out, Mark.
That's projected, that's allowing for growth. If you look at new housing permits and so forth, and new apartment complexes. So they asked us to come up with an estimate, but then they have, I guess I'll call him an engineer at the MSBA that walked through his methodology, which is building permits. If you build a 3-bedroom home, how many children can you expect in a development with 3-bedroom homes, an apartment complex? How many children can you expect? And they have all these estimates, and they say that they project that, we could peak at 905 students. So this building has room, it'll have somewhere under 800 when it opens. And it will be, they don't want you to build a school and then ask for an addition in 10 years. So they're going to build in, I guess, space for that extra 100 kids today.
Okay, because what I looked at, and that got my information out of the annual report.
Yeah.
I looked at every grade coming up from kindergarten
Yep.
to high school. These kids are by the time this finished. The following kids coming up through the elementary schools now do not have the same enrollment numbers. They are less.
Right.
So we don't need a school 700 students because we're not going to have the student body. Don't forget, people who live in this town, their kids go to school. you don't have anywhere else to put houses in this town. We build on every square inch. So, what we have now is what we're gonna have coming into the future. Anything but steady growth.
I think their methodology looks at new construction, right? And what's the number that you could anticipate in the future?
That are outrageously priced.
There is the occasional home going in here and there. And that adds up
So-
to more kids. It's the MSBA's method. We didn't just make up a number.
Yeah, I know.
The MSBA has a formula that they use to recommend what building size they think you should have.
They also see, Mark, that typically when you have a new school, that enrollment will increase because students will come to that school, will come back from other places, private institutions, to there. And we've actually, when we went to visit multiple schools, that was reported from their districts as well.
Yeah, so they look at the current enrollment data and the previous enrollment data for 10 or 15 years. They also look at the number of students that currently live in Walpole that don't go to Walpole, and they factor on a percentage of that coming back. They look at the birth rate. So the students, obviously the kids that aren't enrolled yet, they're looking at the birth rate of the last however many years to understand how many non-school age children are currently in Walpole. They're looking at the death rate. They kind of get a combination of, the average age of the community, and they come up with a number because two things: they don't want to build a school that's too big, and they don't want to hear the district come back to them and say, we built a school that's too small, we need to expand it after you spend all this money. So from that perspective, I mean, the 905 is kind of their professional calculation of where Walpole currently is, where they see Walpole being in the next 10 to 15 years. I mean, that's how far out can you project other than the data that you have. I think the kindergartens and first graders will be the first class through this new building if it happens in sixth grade. So looking back, at least the kids that are currently enrolled, and they're coming up with a number of 905.
I'm going to finish the last three slides. We're just going to finish the last three slides and then take any questions.
So just next steps, as we mentioned, so the big deliverable was the schematic design report, which included the budget, total project schedule. That went into the MSBA on the 25th. That was approved by their board. And they've since issued a draft of a scope and budget agreement. There's actually two documents that the town receives: a scope and budget agreement, which is really the contract that memorializes just that, the scope. This is what the project includes. This is what the budget is going to be. We received that at the beginning of September. Then there's also a project funding agreement, and that formalizes all of the financials. So it's the budget, it's the reimbursement rate, and all the terms that the MSBA has in order to seek reimbursement. Very similar contract was done with the feasibility phase. This is just now the project funding as you move into design and construction. So both of those are in draft form. Both of those would get executed pending an approved project. So those have all the numbers that the MSBA approved in them, and basically will be ready for town meeting, post-town meeting if the project is approved. Following the approval, obviously has to go through town meeting, and there's also a ballot vote on the second, so it requires approval at town meeting as well as approval at the ballot if it makes it to the ballot. Once both of those agreements are executed by the town and the MSBA, then the town could begin the design process and begin submitting project costs at that 55% reimbursement, just like we've been doing for feasibility and schematic. Project timeline. So if approved, then full design begins. So right now we're at schematic design, which is roughly 30% of the full design. So we have about another year left of design. That would start this November, run through the fall of next year. Right now we are talking about an early construction package and the project being built in 3 phases, an enabling phase, if you will, which is really getting the bird site ready for construction. Ideally during next summer when the school is out of session, as far as getting the road in from East Street, setting up construction fences, relocating teacher parking, drop-off lanes, things of that, so that the construction is as isolated as possible. And then when this school comes back in the fall, being able to start kind of real construction on the building for give or take 32 months, and then include some of that enabling phase as well as a demo phase at the end. So obviously we have to build the building, move them over into the new building, and then demolish this current bird, finish the parking lot and landscaping, and that'll wrap up the project. That being said, the building will open prior to the project being done. Right now projected the fall of 2024, which I believe is the First graders will be the first sixth grade class to go through. And then the project would be complete in early 2025. So that would be the landscaping where the current bird is, et cetera. Obviously, you need to wait for good planting seasons, et cetera. And that 5% reimbursement. So the following year after that, the whole year of 2025 would be the final reimbursement process with the MSBA. That's when they do their audits. They get all the other paperwork in for the project, and the town could expect its final 5% reimbursement sometime early 2026, possibly sooner, but we're projecting early 2026. That's just that timeline visually. So again, there'll be a little bit of overlap at the end of design. If we do an early construction package next summer to do that site enabling, then construction would happen for about 2 years on the new building, move in, and then demo and existing bird, finish the site, and then close out with the MSBA. And that's typical for a project of this size. I mean, usually construction is a better part of 3 years, especially if you have an existing building on the site. We're just finishing up a job right now in Natick. Very similar process. The building was as close as 30 feet in some points between the new building and the old building. And upcoming information sessions. So obviously we're here tonight. We're going to do another one next Tuesday at Johnson. There'll be a tour of Johnson ahead of that meeting. I think FinCom is also there at 6. So those folks can come to the meeting as well. And then we're going to do a town meeting prep community forum on October 19th at the Bird. Folks can take a tour of that building if they haven't already or they haven't watched the video. And then obviously town meeting on the 23rd. And if you need more information, we do have a project website. It's a subpage on the school's website. Has a lot of information up there. Has all the building committee meetings, presentations, a couple the presentations to the school committee, all the documentation from the MSBA, overview of the budget and design. It has a link to the MSBA's website. You can also visit that yourself if you want to get more information about current projects that are in their pipeline. And then we have an email address there. If you think of a question after tonight, or someone asks you a question, tomorrow or whenever, shoot us an email. We'll try to get an answer back to you within the day or two. But we will get back to you. And then we keep adding those to a list of frequently asked questions that are also on the website. A lot of folks have had similar questions along the way. Someone's might have asked something you've been thinking about. If you have a new question, we'll add it to it, and we'll try to update that as much as possible. And with that, we'll open up the questions. We got a bunch of other slides, and
What did you? Mr. Stuffer, I see your hand back there.
I'll answer questions.
Do you want to? Do you have a mic? Okay. Sure. No. Do you have a?
Oh, you come up here.
Oh, wait. We have one right here.
Sorry, I thought you were going to ask. Do you need to project?
No. I don't need to project. I'm old school.
All
I have
right.
it written on paper.
You want me to shut this?
BC High, by the way. That's how they taught us.
See right here, too.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Snuffer, Precinct 2. Tonight's forum should contain 3 areas of conversation. You've just seen one on the building and site. Integrated into that is partially something that reflects cost to the taxpayer. And then the one that isn't appropriately discussed tonight, because that's more of the school committee type conversation, is what will be taught in those classrooms. I'd like to talk about the building and site. One of the very best construction mantras that I have ever heard is the following: it is great teamwork that makes the dream work. And I can sponsor my good friend here, Brian Jarvis from Compass Project Management, because we have worked on several projects in the town of Walpole, and my favorite happens to be this one. I think as long as he took care of my wife's fireplace, everything was fine. One of the things I need you to know is that we, the people of the town of Walpole, have greatly contributed to the overall quality of life for the people of the town of Walpole. This site certainly being one of them, and others. For example, one of the things that happens in the world of finance is that it is said that money does not come with instructions. All you have to do is watch any TV financial program, and you will see argumentation all over the place as to what is what we would call cost of doing business, inflation, things of that nature. And one of the things that I would like to ask so that we can see it right from the get-go is someone, and I'm in this case assuming it's the committee or the Board of Selectmen or the school committee or maybe some combination of all three, have chosen a 30-year program. Could you give us the 30-year cost, the 25-year cost, and the 20-year cost? And the reason I ask is sometimes in human nature, because you're going to a vote, you might want to show the lowest possible cost, and that might be the 30-year one. It's hard for me to imagine that one of my newly formed great-grandchildren are going to be 30 years old when that passes. So does anyone have that answer, please? Jim, that's fine, and I understand the process. What's the difference? 20, 25, and 30? Okay, may I make a suggestion, and I know the honesty in your answer. It is very often, in order to sell something, you make it sweeter. And sometimes, fiscally speaking, and remember, money does not come with instructions. It's sometimes the better deep breath to be taken for the shorter amount of time. And that's something I want to have you all consider. The other thing is I want to congratulate every single one of you that have been here for a period of time, and those who have been here and came here because of the things that have been done. The infrastructure for the betterment of this community at large, I'd like to just call your attention to a couple. Adams Farm, new athletic fields, and I think I just hit the wrong button, but look at the amazing thing I did. New senior center, new police facility, new fire facility, new library, new conservation land, new DPW garage. These 8 projects, when you go back and you figure out, combined, they cost $65 million, combined. What I would tell you is when government grows, so do taxes, and taxes chase spending. And what I can tell you is today, just today, in Washington, President Biden announced that he will take a serious look at increasing income taxes, death taxes, I almost had to pay that one when I read it, capital gains taxes, and corporate taxes, all aimed at retired seniors. The proposed middle school of $116 million is money that this time is a little bit different, and I'll tell you why it's different. Because of the word inflation. Every nail, every board foot of lumber, every stroke of paint is costing a different value than you have ever seen in the last 10 to 15 years. And the projections of that, I'm not going to argue with what they might be, but so far I can tell you that the costs are the highest in the last 25 years. And they seem to be growing forward. Again, to show you how much money is and why it doesn't come with instructions, you look at $7 trillion, again, currently being debated in Washington. $7 trillion could build 1,200 facilities like the one you just saw in all 50 states. That gives you the size of money. Washington is holding the entire country hostage, including programs like this and reasons. Broke ain't no joke. Specific to this project, I'd like to know the debt number when you can get it. Okay, and it is. Yeah, and again, I don't know which of those two values is actually the greater one to really bring to the voter. I know the more facile one, the easier one to bring is the lower one. My friend Bill Buckley is quoted as saying, "This is a generational project. Its success will have a generational impact. Its failure will have a generational impact." Let's remember that our seniors over the generation have paid for all that I just spoke about. I thank you.
Questions?
Hello, my name is Irene Gorsica, and the question I have is, if we go with this combined middle school, what are we going to do with the other middle school? Do we have plans for that, or is it just going to be a vacant building?
No, part of the MSBA wants to know if the town has a plan for that. So right now the town obviously needs to do a study with Johnson as to what that use might be. The Bird Middle School is part of the project and would be demolished. That's included in the project cost. The MSBA will reimburse you for demolishing a building if it's required to build your project. So for instance, if we were not building at either of the middle school sites, they would not reimburse demolishing either building. That being said, the Johnson, there's still studying to be done, where that becomes a part of a community center, part of something they could do with rental income, but that's yet to be determined, and that'll be determined most likely over the course of the design phase of this project.
My name is Irene Msba. I have lived in Walpole long enough to see the Bird Middle School be built. And then after that, the West Junior High was built. I have lived in Walpole long enough to see schools built, schools torn down. How long does it take that you build a building and it's no good after 40 or 50 years? Don't they build anything to last anymore? And how long is this school supposed to last? Do you have any idea?
MSBA requires that you design to a 50-year lifespan, and usually the biggest issue with the school systems doing buildings is that the enrollment outpaces the sizes of the current facilities. So from the Bird's perspective, there's definitely portions of the building that are probably still salvageable. I mean, obviously they're using it. Same thing with the Johnson, but the MSBA studies that and it deems, are the classrooms the right size? Do you have the right types of classrooms? Are you able to retrofit the building? So a lot of districts, what they end up finding is that while the building may or may not be salvageable, it's just that the buildings are no longer large enough for some of the programs and some of the enrollments that the districts have. So obviously a combined school here was deemed to be most advantageous for the enrollment. The Bird as it is doesn't have that size, so it either needed to be significantly renovated and added onto or build new.
Well, I hate to sound combative, but I have been to enough meetings like the Bird Middle School, the addition of the high school, the addition on the Fisher School, the addition on the and I always hear the same pitch, that it's not going to hurt you that much. A lot of us senior citizens cannot afford the taxes anymore. what about us? I'm sorry to put it that way. I know all the young peoples want to see their kids go to brand new schools, have brand new playing fields. But what about the rest of us that are paying taxes? Now, if you go to another state, after your child is after school, finished with school, you don't have to pay school taxes anymore. But we go on and on forever.
Do you want to? Yeah, so I mean, our job is to try to make the school as cost effective as possible because we're cognizant of that fact, and it's an issue for every community, especially how it affects the seniors and people on fixed incomes. Our goal is to try to make the schools as affordable as possible, and then really turn to whatever town programs might be available for seniors that could help you, with that situation if you need it. And there are programs available through the assessor's office, and that's what a lot of districts turn to.
Abatements, they give you $100 off your tax or something? Big deal.
All the information.
Yeah, we actually brought handouts of it in case people are interested to look at. There are programs for seniors, people on fixed income that could possibly offset the cost of this project. But again, it's all individually based.
Well,
So
following what Irene said, why don't, maybe we can do a horse trade here. You want a new school, then anybody who's over 65 that lived in the town, how many years? 25, 30 years maybe? Don't have to pay school tax anymore. We'll divide the taxes out and that thing gets erased from us forever. Maybe we can entertain a new school. But until we get some kind of break, we ain't gonna, whistle to the wind. You're not gonna get an override.
Slippery slope on the way out.
You get credit.
Look at me.
My name is Linda Winslow, and I'm in Precinct 4. And I am very much affiliated with the Walpole Council on Aging, but I'm speaking as a private citizen. I also have had these numbers shown to me by census people, and I'm not a brilliant statistician, so bear with me. Currently in Walpole, I believe the statistics for school enrollment in the entire town is 3,000 students. And the specific population for senior citizens over the age of 60 is 6,000. So there are more senior citizens in our community than there are students in our school system. I'm not saying we don't need new schools. We do. I know the conditions that the teachers are under right now, and I just want to know how we can find a happy medium in getting a tax relief that's more than $100 on your tax would be a start. But I was just wondering if the committee was aware of these numbers. And I think they're as current as they're going to be. And I'm a retired maternity nurse, and I know that the birth rate's going down and the senior citizen population is going up. So if you project, 10, 15 years or even 12 years from now, what is that school that probably won't even be finished by then? What is that going to look like? Are we going to have empty space that we don't know what to do with? Thank you.
Anybody else question?
For their hard work on this. My name's Jane Bergen. I'm in RTM Precinct 3. I'm not sure this is really working, but my kids. Oh yeah, my kids went through middle school and high school in Walpole, and my husband and I are seniors. We've lived here for 41 years, and I guess I always felt like my kids went to Johnson, and I always thought everybody was like, "Oh wow, Bird is so much better." And then I did the tour 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, oh my God, this is appalling. The condition of this school is appalling. And yes, I am concerned about my taxes too. I'm I'm on Social Security as well. But I also feel that we have a responsibility as citizens to really consider the future. And the future is our children and what they need. It's a very different world than when I went to high school and had 1,400 kids in my class and quadruple session. Kids need a different learning environment, and I think it's our responsibility to provide that. There has been research done here. There's been years worth of research on this. And if we turn this down, I think it was 8 years or 10 years or some very long figure before this can even be brought forward again. So although I do agree that taxes are a concern for everyone, no one likes to pay taxes. But I think we also have a responsibility as citizens of this community. Someone paid for your education, and we have a responsibility to pay for our children. And I really applaud everybody that has worked so hard on this, because they have not considered lightly any of these numbers or any of these facts or statistics. It may not be the numbers you want, it may not be the statistics that make you happy, but this is the reality. And this is the world we live in. And we want our children to have a good education and to be able to succeed, just as you were able to succeed in the world that you grew up in. So I fully support this override. Like I said, I'm in RTM Precinct 3, and I hope that everyone can consider not only their own individual circumstance, but the situation of our children and other young families in this community. So that is all. It's not really a question, it's just a comment.
Teachers teach. Got good teachers.
Oh, sure. Do you want that? Use the mic.
Jack.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. For anybody that doesn't know me, my name's Jack Conroy. Come up, Sally. You can sit right in the front row. Jack Conroy. All right, there we go. Just so everybody understands some of the background, my wife Judy's here tonight. Both of her and I grew up in Walpole, graduated from Walpole. We had 5 kids, all went to Walpole, and now I have 2 grandkids who live in Walpole. So you can see we go along all the different ages. What I wanted to talk tonight about was most people here don't understand. I think nobody understands outside the committee is this is not your permanent building committee. The permanent building committee was set up many, many years ago in the 70s. We had 7 people from varieties of life, whether you were an architect, engineer, contractor, worked in the business. This has been set up by the state where there's 15 members. And as you saw tonight, only 3 of us came over from the building committee. So this is taking on a whole different, best word I can say, mantra to go forward. So, and I want you to understand, I've been on the building committee since 1988. I was the chairman, started on the library, did the police station, fire station, and this building. So just so you understand, I know what this is about. I'm in the business. I've been in the construction business for over 40 years, and part of it has been building schools, of which I'm still part of. So I know the ins and outs in the construction. So that's why I've always volunteered to get on these committees. What I'm here to speak tonight is why this was a little bit different. And what hasn't been talked about tonight is when we're on the building committees, we were bringing forward to you, the voters, and town meeting, a bid. So if the senior center was, I think it was $4.5 million, you knew what the cost was. Police station, fire station, high school, Every project pretty much came in, you knew ahead of time. Matter of fact, I'll go back on the Elm Street School. And for anybody that doesn't know, my wife Judy, when she was on the school committee, went and negotiated with Christian Life to get that for 600 grand. So I think we know a little bit about giving back to the community and making something of value to the community. So with that being said, I wanted to bring it forward tonight. What everybody, it hasn't been said tonight is, you're going to go forward. We're all going to go forward. And if this town meeting has to do their vote, then it goes to the voters. If it passes, you're going to vote for a number. You're going to vote for 115 million. There's no guarantee it ain't going to go over. So if it comes in above that, we have a problem. Now, I will say from my own experience, and I'm going to really, if this goes forward, I'm going to have my experience, is I'm going to make sure we're not going forward until everything is bid out. And I have specific experience with that. Town of Brookline has gone nuts building. They built new high schools, and they kept putting the bid packages out one at a time. They went way over, way over. Now there's a project that I'm involved in, the Driscoll School. They got smart. They were bidding out every facet of that project, even to the landscape. I had to price out some sidewalks that with 3.5 years from now I wouldn't be doing my work. And then I found out why. Because the Brookline people had got stung. So they wanted to find out. So I just want everybody to understand there's no guarantee that this will be the final number. We could need more, okay? Now, what I will say is my experience, like on the Elm Street School, when we bid that out, the electrical went nuts. They call them filed sub-bids, meaning in this state, you have to bid out your electrical, your mechanical, your plumbing, your masonry, okay? And there's a few others. Typically, that runs about 50%. At Elm Street, it was 75%. I made a big stink, say, no, pull it back, because we're not going to get it under. So we had to redesign, come back. We have always worked as the building committee within the money that was appropriated and voted on. This is one of the issues here that everybody should understand. It's a very key issue, is you could go off, it could come under. I'm not saying it won't, but it could go over too. But this will be the first time in a long time that the voters have been asked to vote on something that we don't know the final cost. So that's why it's different. And I'm up here, I'm not giving you whether I'm for or against. I'm just trying to explain to everybody this is a whole different process. The other issues that we had here is there were other avenues looked at. Johnson School was voted down 12-3. The 3 members were the 3 building committee members. Okay, the Johnson was actually more economical. The Johnson had no disruption because it was going to go up on the hill. It didn't seem to want to be. If we were the building committee, once upon a time, you would give us a project, and you'd say, I need this many students, I need this and this. We would go and we'd find the best place to do it, and we wouldn't have the outside people telling us where they want it because they like it. We'd pick the Johnson. So that is an issue. Unfortunately for the children who are going to go to school there, that is another issue. They're going to be disrupted. My 2 oldest daughters went through for lack of a better word, the crap for 4 years up at the high school. It's not something nice to be in, but with middle school, it gets a little bit more dicey. But we'll forget that. That can be handled. I'm not saying it's not going to be handled, but I just want to get everybody to understand. We also have a few items that haven't really been at least talked about. I know it's been mentioned, and we have a few items here that are not reimbursable that as a building committee member I voted against. One of them is an auditorium, 600-seat auditorium. Mass building only allows cafetoriums, so we're paying that 100%, just so you understand. We also have the cafeteria. My understanding, it's going to be 7,500 square feet, so they're moving up the kitchen up to the high school, from the high school up there. That's another cost that's not reimbursable. And the 3rd gym. Now, one of the things everybody should understand is they're keeping the fields. I've fought over that. I think it would have been better out front. But I asked the architects, and I knew it anyway. There's no requirement for middle schools for fields. So we're not keeping the fields for the kids. Why we're keeping them, I don't know, but there were other avenues. As a permanent building committee doing this for over 33 years, I saw different avenues what would have been better. One thing that was thrown out, I'll throw it out now, is Johnson, we're going to pollute our well. Well, our well's 400 feet away. That's a minimum you can be there. We're over 800 feet up on a hill. So that was kind of like a stretch. But I just want to bring these out to everybody so you know what you're buying into. One of the things that I think could happen if it does go is we already know where the cuts can come from, what's going to have to be. They have to redo it, like the auditorium, maybe a cafetorium, or we got a few items like that. But we have a lot of items that are not reimbursable 100%. The other one is Brian, I think he's nodding his head, is swing space. If we got to do something temporary, temporary parking lots, anything temporary for the new building, whether it's temporary parking lot, fencing, a new entrance for the kids to come in, non-reimbursable. State wants you to build new on a new site, which makes sense. So there's a lot of added costs to going to the bird. But I want everybody to understand there are other avenues. And I also want everybody more to understand, I think the biggest point here tonight is that when we vote, and if it goes through, that number is not necessarily the final number. My opinion is that if we exceed it, I don't think we'll be going out again. I think you'll have to see the building committee working within itself to make the modifications as such on that. But as I said, none of us will know the final number, and it's fine. The school looks wonderful. And one thing I do want to clear up, it's been thrown out forever, 50 years. I hear that. The 50 years, and I think Brian explained a little bit, 50 years is what the state will reimburse us for. You can't come to school building assistance until 50 years. They tried on the high school, and they said, 20 years ago, go. That's what they want to do up at Byrd. So now we're at a middle school. So you can't go, the 50 has nothing to do with the lifespan of the building. It has to do with the reimbursement. And the state basically says is, I'm not going to give you a new school every 50 years because you run it down and just let it fall apart. That's kind of what, and it makes sense. As far as any lifespan of any building, we know they last as long as you want them. Both buildings are the best buildings you're ever going to have, reinforced concrete. That's what my specialty is, and those structurally will last forever. Now, whether you're talking about the HVAC and all that, that's a whole nother system. But I wanted to get that out too. I want everybody to understand the whole dynamics of this, and so that when you do vote, you understand what they're up against, and from the other side of it. I think I've just pretty much covered everything, and I felt I needed to come here because the reason. I don't know, I got into the club last November when I turned 65, so now I guess I can come here. I won't get carded. So I felt I needed to do that. Plus, I think most people in this room would know me and seen what's been done over the years. If I went to a meeting at the elementary school, I might have somebody who remembers me as, oh, Mr. Conroy, but I just want to explain to everybody here tonight, it's a process, and everybody's got to think of the process and where we're going from that. So that's enough what I said. I'm sure you want to shut my mic off.
Does anybody here at the table want to respond to any of the comments? Or Brian, did you want to talk about the third gym space? It's not a gym, the third gym. Do you want to talk about that?
Well,
it's a classroom space.
Thanks, Jack, for comments. I'll respond to a couple of those. So the MSBA's process, as I mentioned in the presentation, is well, I agree with Jack. Yes, on previous projects, if you don't go through the MSBA project, a lot of times you come to town meeting and you have a bid in hand because you're able to do that on that particular process. Not every project that we don't do just schools. We also do public projects. Not every project comes to town meeting with a bid It'd be great if you had a bid, but that's not the way the MSBA works. The MSBA wants to have some indication from the town that you're actually going to do this project versus going through the entire design phase, spending all the money, which in this case could be $8, $9, $10 million by the time you're done with it to design it. They want to have some indication that you're actually going to do it. So they've changed their process, or the process they've always had is that you go to town meeting at the end of schematic design, which is currently where we're at, with an estimate, the best estimate that you can come up with at the time, lock everything in, and that's what they set the reimbursement. That's just the way the process works. If you want MSBA's reimbursement, you have to go through that process. So you can go without MSBA reimbursement and get a bid, but you're not going to get the $30 million or whatever, $37 million that's coming back from the state. Some districts do elect to do that, but most of them are electing to get some type of reimbursement from the state. Every district is different, but you do have, this is the process that the MSBA states. It wasn't a Walpole decision. To come to without a bid number. That being said, part of the process with the MSBA, it's a very long and thorough process. There will be at least 3 or 4 more estimates along the way as we go through design to verify that the number is still holding. And obviously with Jack's help and the people on the building committee, we'll be working to make sure that that design comes in on budget. Obviously things happen. Our experience in school construction is that we've come in on budget or under budget. This budget does have several contingencies built into it for things that do come up. It is construction, things happen. You do have change orders. Obviously, if something comes off in the bids, then we have to deal with it that way. But that was a decision that the community will have to make. We've not had a school project, knock on wood, come in over the budget that was approved to the MSBA at the completion of the project. You can look at that up at the MSBA website as well, so you can see the history of their projects and see what final numbers were. But the MSBA is very stringent with the project should be done within this budget. If the budget does go over, and sometimes districts elect to go over the budget for their own reasons, the MSBA will not be partaking in that reimbursement. So yes, that would be on the district. But this is the MSBA's process. You have to come to town meeting at the end of schematic design. I will also just clarify that the auditorium is a decision that was made prior to submitting schematic design because they want to have that included in the estimate, and they want to have that the work associated with the auditorium included. So the auditorium cafetorium decision has been made from the MSBA's perspective. Not likely that would change from the MSBA's perspective unless we really need to do something about value engineering and getting that cost down if we don't think we can do it for the current budget. While the auditorium in theory is not reimbursable from the MSBA's perspective for a middle school, they don't consider an auditorium part of a middle school curriculum. Doesn't mean that districts don't do them. A lot of districts do decide to do them based on their curriculum because every education program is different. So they, again, one of those quick, easy, ineligible things for MSBA is they just check off auditorium and they take it off the top. That being said, it's not a straight deduct or a straight add of $5 million of the cost of the auditorium, because if you didn't do the auditorium, as Jack said, you'd be doing a cafetorium. So you'd be putting a stage in the cafetorium, that square footage. You'd be adding the extra music room, like Bridget said. So it would be it would be slightly less than what the MSBA is saying. But that non-eligible money is already factored into that budget that we went through tonight. And I will clarify that the additional gym space, the alternate physical education space that Dr. Goff talked about, and the larger central kitchen to centralize the district's kitchen in the new facility is included in the project. It's included in that budget, and it was found to be reimbursable by the MSBA. So again, when you submit the information to the MSBA looks at the educational program of the district, because each district is different. And then part of we actually have a slide on ineligible cost, and they look at things like those types of spaces and see how the districts would actually use them and if the district would actually support them. For instance, on our Marshfield project, the MSBA found a boat building workshop to be eligible for reimbursement because that was a traditional historical curriculum at Marshfield. Every district has their own individual things that sometimes are eligible through the MSBA. So in this case, the third gym space and the central kitchen were found to be eligible for the MSBA, and they're included in the eligibility calculations. And then temporary operations, the fencing on the project, that's usually general requirements. That's part of basically anything that happens on the site gets into the site costs of the project. And then the site costs are capped on MSBA projects at 8% of construction. What goes into those costs are different for every project. And they basically cap the cost of site construction, so roads or fields or temporary swing spaces or whatever it might be, at 8% to try to level the playing field because not all districts have costs associated with them. Some districts have a lot of site costs associated with them, depending on where the school is and some of the amenities that they want. So they cap it at 8%. Anything that goes over that 8% as total cost of construction that's related to site, then they deem those costs to be ineligible. So that's factored into this as well. I'll find that slide.
Do you have anything else, anything to add before I go?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name's Linda Coletti. I live in Precinct 4, and I would like you to bring up that picture of the aerial view of the new school and parking lots and all of that. Right there. May I go up to that? I hate to see you knock down the existing gym that is separate from the Bird Middle School. We had just ramped it a few years ago, I understand. It's a separate building, and I was told that the reason why they want to knock it down is because they need this parking. Now, I understand the new school will be built 20 feet from the old school.
I don't think it's that close. It's close, but it's not 20 feet.
Okay, it's close. Close enough so that if we keep the existing gym, we can still have easy access from the new school to the old gym. Just as they have it now, they have to leave the Bird Middle School and walk over to the gym. And that brick building is sound. So my point is this: if we keep that building, paint the hallways like we did at the town hall, clean it up a little bit, we could save space in the new school. We don't need a gym in the new school because we'll have that building next to it available. We won't be knocking down a beautiful brick building with its own heat. It's got its own heat already. I believe it's gas. I saw pipes out there. And we could save a lot of square footage if we could eliminate a new gym in the school. And if the population of students increases over the years, well, we'll have that gym space for classroom space, and we'll never have to add on. And so let's not waste that perfectly good building. Now, somebody said to me, oh, but we need it for parking because we don't want to disturb the ball field. Why? What's more important, saving a building that costs thousands and thousands of dollars? Let's save that gym, and let's put that ball field down over in this corner for the kids. And look at how much money we'd be saving. Why do we have to save that ball field and knock down that beautiful gym that exists today? It doesn't make sense to me. I can't buy that idea. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
Just anybody else who hasn't spoken, and then I'll go right back to you.
Sure. Bob Damish, Precinct 7. And this is the perfect slide I want to ask about. Just want to make sure everybody here has an understanding of it. Just so I have an understanding as well. So my understanding is East Street's down here, correct? Mm-hmm. All right. And then Washington's up here. So it looks like the buses are coming in from East Street. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And will the parents be coming in that way as well to drop off and pick up?
Right now, I think we have it. It's both circulations, correct?
So parents can come in from down here, from from Washington Street?
As well, yes.
Okay, so I walk around town a lot. I see a lot of cars backed up on the side streets when schools are letting out. So let's say there's 100 parents looking to pick up. Where do those cars park while they're waiting? This just came to me while I was looking at the schematic. While the parents are waiting for their kids to get out of school, especially if it's like a rainy, snowy day, where are the parents going to all queue up?
Part of the thinking of having multiple possible design level where this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So part of the thinking is having multiple entrances to the site, and again, the term that is used by the engineers is as much site porosity as possible, ways in and out of the site to ease with some of the traffic concerns. Obviously, bringing another middle school to this site and giving as many entry points from multiple aspects of the site. But as far as queuing goes, the main entrance right now is here, and whether or not there's multiple pickup and drop off. So right now, one of the points is trying to have separated bus circulation and separated parent drop-off circulation so that you don't have buses and cars crossing each other. But the point of having, or one of the aspects of having multiple entrances is that you provide all of this queuing space for folks that are there before pickup or drop-off. So similar now to Bird, they come down, they loop around the parking lot, and they stop. The first one stops at the drop-off point, and everyone backs up behind them all the way out to Washington Street. The goal is that you're providing as much distance as possible for that to happen in as many directions as possible, and you can get as many of those people on site to hopefully avoid having cars line up in the neighborhoods around the building.
So only the buses go down to East Street?
No, the part of the thinking initially was that that might just be a bus lane only, but then the issue that you have similar to parent drop-off is you have buses and vehicles coming from all areas of town, and that might be making them go different routes to go to different intersections and causing more impacts to those intersections. So the goal is to provide as much flexibility that folks coming from Washington side, north or south, East Street side, north or south, will have access points. And whether these are restricted turns that you can't take a left turn at certain times of day, that all hasn't been figured out yet. But the goal is to provide as much flexibility and to provide as much on-space queuing so that you don't have people backed up onto East or Washington or feel the need to, that they can't get in and out fast enough and they have to park in neighborhood streets.
I'm just going to follow up.
You can use that mic.
Sir, are you done? Are you got more questions?
So the woman that from the company that did the traffic study pointed out that, we could come up with a particular plan, but when the traffic actually starts moving, she said, she used the term, it finds its own equilibrium. So we could give you a traffic plan right now, but it would likely change, whether it be buses here or buses there or only buses or only cars, queuing and so forth. So all that parking and street design is pretty accurate, but it's kind of a placeholder, and it could be subject to a little bit of change, and who comes in what entrance could also change depending on facts on the ground when if the school were to open.
Yeah, I guess my concern was I just didn't want to see cars backing up on these major thoroughfares.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
you get this huge suck of traffic just going to one spot
Right.
twice
Right.
a day.
Yep.
Hi, I have a comment. My name is Jeannie Gagne, and I'm one of the abutters living right along this road. If I may come up and point to it, and I'm representing several neighbors. Those of you who are here don't know me, you don't know. I'm actually a little fatutzeled. It's upsetting. There are several of us who have been in touch with you for several months about the impact on the neighborhood, and no one has been discussing it, and our requests have basically gone on deaf ears. So here's the situation. This now road started out much smaller. It was going to be only buses. Now it's literally a road. Can you imagine living along here? The traffic on East Street already is pretty intense. My property is right here. There is a berm right here. We have neighbors all along here. The berm is going to be, I'm sure you guys haven't revealed this, but we're guessing logically, dug into in order to build some kind of retaining wall. There are children who play here. Therefore, they're going to have to build fencing all along here. This is a 2-lane road, as I understand it. This, people, is a road. Now, how many people will take this road and cut through to get to Washington Street? It's bad enough as it is that the parking along our street is there during game day. I get it that we need a school because the Bird School currently is in poor condition. However, doubling the number of students impacting, there's neighbors here. They kind of fixed this intersection of High Plain Street and East Street. Yeah, it's a pain in the patootie now, right? So you can only imagine the impact on dozens of people who are also paying taxes, to have our property values go down, to have fumes day and night, to have lights installed for safety now coming in our bedroom windows, all because we need twice as many students in one building. This makes no sense. I get it. If you don't live anywhere near here, you know, it's nice to have a brand new building. Do we really need a town center at a middle school with a beautiful gymnasium? Now there's going to be all this traffic 24/7. I think we should consider the impact on dozens of Walpole tax-paying residents. And we feel like our requests have been received. We hear you, but we're going to do what we're going to do anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, as Mrs. Gagne said, the details of along that road have not been worked out, and it's really a driveway. I mean, I don't think it's not going to be called a road from a town perspective. It's a driveway. It's 2 lanes. It does show some parallel parking, and again, the intent of access off of East Street is to try to not have as much parking along East Street as there currently is, not to have overflow parking be in the neighborhoods like Grasshopper Lane, to have everything queue on the site, provide some parallel parking to see if it fits, which it does. Whether or not that stays in the project at this point is yet to be determined, but that gets some people parking at the fields off of East Street. The location of the new parking lot between the school and the field now gives better access from that parking lot. It's a bigger parking lot to access the fields at East Street. Again, trying to get the cars off of East Street. We have had several meetings with the neighbors and exchanged information regarding this design. They've seen everything that we have. This is as far as the design has been developed. And part of the intent of, again, making an additional entrance to the site is to do what some people have mentioned, is to give people the most flexibility getting in and out of the site so they actually use the driveways and not park along side streets or the neighbors. We looked at possibly adding a second entrance only at the Washington Street site, but if you're familiar with the high school during pickup and drop off, it creates a very similar situation with multiple entrances on the same road, which ends up creating a very unsafe condition because you have people coming every direction from multiple entrances within a very short span, only about 100 feet. So that was the solution that was come up with that we think adds the most benefit to the project, but a lot of the details and concerns still need to be addressed that the neighbors have raised, and we're aware of that.
Maximum capacity when people are picking up kids and everything else. Have to get fire department equipment through there?
Yes, this plan's been reviewed with all of public safety, and that was one of the items that they brought up. So as you can notice, there's a turning lane, and part of the parallel parking thought is that provides a quote-unquote pass lane if a fire truck needs to get through while people are queuing. So that has been reviewed. We do have turning radius studies done on the entire property, and we can actually fit a fire apparatus behind the building on that road. So all of that's been studied with. We can't get the ladder back there, but we can get an engine. Yeah, we can get an engine back there. So we have been in contact, and that'll be further developed if this passes and gets into more detailed design. But yes, that was part of the thinking with both entries, is that it would allow for public safety to get by.
Hi, I'm Sandhya Malur, Precinct 6. I had actually 3 questions. The first one I wanted to ask was that you had mentioned increased enrollment, your anticipation of increased enrollment. I wanted to find out whether the curriculum was going to be enhanced for the children and whether this was going to perhaps bring new jobs to Walpole, if that was going to happen. That was one question.
Yeah, with the sorry. With regard to increased enrollment and visiting several districts, we kind of did, we've been everywhere. We've been to Wakefield, to Situate, and looked at all the different middle schools. And every single one of them have had increased enrollment when they've built a new school. So they had to anticipate, and I think that's why the MSBA, I don't want to speak for them, but the MSBA anticipates that. Yeah, especially with that and with the combined middle school in terms of the curriculum. Correct. So if you looked at, and to your point, when we looked at the combined middle school, being able to have those opportunities, have those flexibilities, those flexible spaces for 21st century learning, for inquiry, project-based learning, STEAM spaces, in those classrooms, that we would be able to. We talked about the biological sciences and environmental science. If we end up having solar, there's a whole curriculum. When you have the indoor-outdoor learning, so you really want to do is increase this active participation and global citizenship with your students that we can create, that we're unable to do right now. Yes, because you can create different exploratory programs, right, that we don't have currently, that we would be able to do.
You had talked about the auditorium, this brand new big auditorium. Is there an idea around sort of generating revenue for the auditorium that maybe could be given back to the town and to the townspeople?
Yep.
You could rent out the auditorium?
So there are plans. There is a demand in the town for additional auditorium space, especially of this caliber. So there are groups in town that are interested that have not rented because we've been at capacity or there's conflicts. So it would free up availability within this building to do some other performances. And I'm not saying that it'll be booked every weekend, but there is capacity out there. There's a willingness to utilize space of this sort. I think we've.
Not only looking at your gyms and your auditoriums, but even other space. I know that there might be some districts who have college classes on the weekends that now we can be able to offer, and you rent those spaces out as well. That's just one example. Anybody else? Hold on, I just want to make sure we get people that have it. Okay, great.
Are those plans written down anywhere that people could read them?
The ed plan? Yes, yep.
Revenue generating plan?
I don't know about revenue generating, but the educational plan. So we can talk. Sorry. Go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me now? Thanks. I'm just seeking facts. That's the most important thing. And I want to thank Jack for your information, and Cliff, the information that you presented as well, and everybody on the board here as well. Very informational. Question that I have. You're basing the average cost or assessment of a home, say, $560 or $556 for an assessment. You're indicating that the taxes might increase about $438 based upon that. Questions that I have: when would the actual tax rate go into effect? What year are you talking about? Are we talking 2024 when the taxes affect everybody in this room? Is that when it starts? And considering that, I've noticed obviously every year the assessments go up 2.5% on everybody's rates here. And your assessment of your home as well goes up every year or when they do the assessments. So if you're talking about that rate that you're referring to now, 3 years from now, that assessment rate, if you add 2.5 and 2.5 on, is going to be a little bit higher. So I'm wondering, the rate that you're referring to, the 556, is that something you're talking about in today's terms? Or is that the rate 2 years from now would that be a higher figure and hence a higher tax rate that everyone would be paying? Those are a couple of the questions that I had, and people have other questions as well. But thank you.
Yep.
As far as when is this going to go into effect, all depends on when the project gets completed. Obviously, we won't go out 75 million right away. Project, that won't. Actually go on the tax. We're asking for with this vote authorization to go out. Doesn't mean we're going to go out and do it tomorrow. Estimates that are back in March, we went to go borrow for about $7 million for the Fields project. It was a what Brian showed is
Joanne?
Joanne Mulligan, Precinct 5. Thank you, Jim. I was wondering, do we have any debt that will be rolling off that will kind of, in the next few years, that will counter affect some of this?
Yeah, I think I have those numbers. So, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. I got.
4 projects that are falling off between now and fiscal year 2030. Those projects are the library, the Elm Street School. So I think, Joanne, what you're getting at is, okay, town of Walpole, you're telling me the tax impact is an extra about the net impact.
Yes, I have a question for this gentleman here, sir. Hi. Would you consider dropping that 2.5 a year?
It's not my decision.
Whose decision?
Ultimately, it's the select board.
Okay, I'll see the select board on that one. Now, one quick question. I didn't get any response to my idea about keeping that old gym. Whether you want to build a new gym inside the school or not, by keeping it, we could bring in some revenue by renting it to an artist, art studio, daycare, a shelter. What's your response to that, sir?
I think we had looked at possibly renovating the existing Bird, and given what they needed to do to the building and the spaces they wanted to put in the building to make it fit both middle schools. The way that the site works with the existing middle school, if you've noticed on the site plan that the classrooms were closest to the gym and the new gym was on the far wing, and one of the points of the design was also to create kind of an academic and a community wing, so it was kind of separated. So at the end of the day, the layout of the building and the way they need the classroom association kind of fit better in the front half of the building, and then the community space was in the back half of the building away from the current gym. And the current gym is not big enough for the size of both middle schools coming there. It's smaller than the Johnson gym. So the thinking is that they needed a larger gym in the third gym space, and they're having it on the other side of the building to be more in the community area, along with the auditorium and the community entrance.
It's hard to even have families in there to watch a game. If anybody's ever been in the Bird Middle School gym, there's no lines, there's no seating capacity. You can't even. It's hard to just get parents in there to watch a game.
And we did look at moving. We did look at options that had the building or portions of the building on the field, and the baseball field that's closest to the old gym is the largest baseball field. So you could possibly replicate that field on another part of the fields, but you wouldn't be able to replace the number of fields that you had if you moved that baseball field. And then another aspect of the fields is if you end up replicating the field. So even if you damage the fields and have to repair them, or if you want to move the baseball field to the other side, and rebuild it, so to speak, that cost is also in the project. So you're paying for that cost as part of the project. It's part of that site cost, which is probably over the cap, which isn't reimbursable. So there was a lot of variables around keeping that. At the end of the day, they didn't think it was the most cost-effective solution to keep the smaller gym when they actually needed a bigger gym, and they kind of wanted it clustered with the rest of the community areas of the building as well, which were best fit on the other side.
Okay, Janet.
It was a good idea though.
This is just a very small question. Janet Fasanello, Precinct 3. As far as the auditorium goes, which I think is a definite need for Bird and for middle schools, why would we build a 600 capacity auditorium if the enrollment is 800?
So again, trying to have an economical auditorium, so to speak, and it's not uncommon that couple sizes in auditorium. Either you put everyone in the auditorium or you put a class, and we thought that we kind of met in the middle ground, which would allow for one class to possibly be performing, or if someone's putting on a show, it's basically one student per class with 2 people from home in the audience, or you could have one class performing, 2 classes in the audience. It gave the school a little bit of flexibility versus maybe an auditorium that only sat 300 and the cost of the auditorium that cost 900. So it was kind of a middle ground as far as to get the right. The seating, I believe, is just under 600. So there's not you're not going to be able to seat the entire school population in one performance. And I don't know if they necessarily do performances like that now anyway in middle schools. Yeah, and that was a decision point that is opted to go for a slightly middle-sized auditorium to try to keep the cost down.
Because we would have had to increase the square footage of the auditorium. Yeah, exactly. The footprint would have driven up the cost. So I just want to get to somebody who we haven't heard from.
I have a list here of many things that supposedly are wrong with the Bird Middle School. To me, they appear to be cosmetic, which can be repaired, not tear the building down and build a closet. I think they could be cosmetically repaired for around, we'll take a figure, maybe 10 million, 15 million, not 125 million by tearing the building down. And another thing that you people maybe have forgotten or never even thought of, who educates the kids? Not the buildings. The teachers educate the kids. Get good teachers. We don't need fancy buildings. If you have a good staff, good teachers, the kids will learn.
Well, thank you for complimenting good teachers. I like that, being a former teacher. But just to address that, I'm glad that you asked that, because I do think that people have that comment and that feedback. In terms of looking at that, and if you take a look at the educational plan, which talks about deficiencies, a lot of it is space. And throughout the years, what Bird Middle School has done, for example, is retrofitted and its space, have closed down classrooms for example, creating special education programs in order to keep our students in district instead of sending them out of district. That has created space issues. So for example, we closed an art room to make that additional space. We've closed a classroom in order to make that a reading space. We've actually moved the media center, and our library became a special education classroom, and the media was moved to a woodshop tech room in order to be able to create the space. The OT and PT is in a small office space. There are no meeting spaces. There's one meeting space for the entire building for any type of general education or special education meetings. There is one extremely small space to counsel our students, where we have our guidance counselor, our adjustment counselor, and a school psychologist are all in one space, which compromises the confidentiality. There's nowhere for parents to sit when they come in and they're waiting, or if a student is sent to the office. I know I'm being specific, but I'm just giving you some examples. Right now, there are chorus classes and music classes that occur during lunch because it is in a cafetorium. We actually had a makeshift robotics room, an orchestra class, and technology department all sitting in one room that was adjacent to the media center. So those are just some examples of how we've tried to make space over the years where there was none, and it has just expanded upon its useful life of the rooms that we need and the space that we need in order to have these programs. But I do appreciate you bringing that up. Is there anything else? Okay, I have one more, and then I gotta wrap up. So, and we'll stay up here.
This needs a comment and a question. First off, the comment, Jim, I'm going to hold you that you're not going to go out and borrow like Mikey did in the library, borrow it all, and we never got he couldn't figure out how to give $1.5 million back to everybody. That's the truth. Library came in $1.5 million under. He borrowed it all. How do I give it back? That's why I'm not too happy sometimes with government. So everybody understand that $1.5 million went gone. I told him how to do it. Just cut everybody's taxes by $1.5 million. But more importantly is, after this woman here said, what is going to be the position of the school committee and the building committee, which I'm part of, we going to do a site plan hearing for this school as been done on the other schools to date? Because what happens is, as you got up there, I'm on the planning board, happen to be the king, so to speak, is we had the high school come in and we had the elementary school come in. Yeah, maybe you didn't like that comment, but that's what I am. That's what they call me sometimes. They call me a lot of other stuff. But what it's going to happen is, it will flush out this stuff. Right now, you said you designed it. You don't know what their problems are. We always talk about lighting. We always talk about access. That needs to be flushed out. Per Mass General laws, you don't have to do it. You can just put your thumb up to them and say, no, we don't have to. But historically, we have done that only for the neighbors so they understand, and there's always these little quirk things that they might want to hear about. Now, I don't know whether the new entrance is going to have the retaining wall on their side and there's a fence, or we're going to have the road high and a fence there. Those are all the things that the neighbors need to talk about. So my suggestion, my recommendation is there should be a site plan filed with the planning board, just to go through all the motions to make sure everything's there. Plus, we also get, once again, the DPW, the police department, and the fire. We'll always have comments from those people too. So it's more for the neighbors. You're going into a neighborhood, they should have their say, and everything that goes with it. They may not still like it at the end. You still may have the traffic, but at least you won't have any lights in your windows or something like that. I think it's a very key. Like I said, we did Elm Street, there's nobody there. And high school, we had a few people and a few compromises that you don't notice when you design these things. It's like, the big entrance coming in. Of course, they didn't realize those lights were going to be on forever until 11 o'clock. So the guy across the street, Mr. Nyden, didn't really like them, but that wasn't our choice. But we should do that to show that you are involved with everyone. I know, Brian, you're nodding your head. I know it's not up to you, but that's something needs to be considered.
No, MSBA makes a full permit matrix required in DD, so we'll start that. If it's approved, that'd be starting the next design phase.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we're going to stay here. We thank you all for coming, and I really personally appreciate your feedback and your questions. We've been taking that down, but we're going to stay up here if you have any additional feedback or questions. So thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Bridget, yeah.